Good morning. How are you today?
I am here. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm on and visible there. I'm pushing all the right buttons. Good morning, Gina. How are you? Good.
Good morning. Hey, everybody. We have RG Belsky, an award-winning author of crime fiction and a New York City journalist with us today. His newest mystery, Broadcast Blues, is touring with us, and it was just published 8 days ago.
January 2nd. So that's
That's so exciting. And this is the sixth in the Clare Carlson series, correct?
right. So Clare Carlson, people who aren't familiar with it, is a TV journalist in New York. I have been a TV journalist in New York, amazingly enough. Obviously I've drawn a lot of real things. This is the sixth book in the series. It began in 2018, and we've done a book a year since then.
Wow, that is so exciting. Now, tell us a little bit about Claire and who she is and how this all started.
So Claire is like a lot of people, women as well as men, but especially women that I've worked with in New York over the years, in that she has a very complicated life. A lot of people, like, you tend to think, oh, they have a very straightforward life. They go to work from 9 to 5, they go home, they have their family, they have their dinner, they watch TV, they go to bed. That's not Claire. Claire's life is like, on a professional level, she's great. She's terrific. She's honest. She's smart. She's aggressive. She breaks all these big stories. She's a great journalist.
Mhm.
But I have found in my life that it's very hard to have it all, as they say. And what suffers in her life is her personal life. And I describe her personal life as kind of like a train wreck. She's been married and divorced 3 times. She makes all the wrong decisions on men, bad choices. Uh, she just got she says the wrong thing to people a lot of times. It gets herself in trouble. But again, I've drawn on a lot of people I know, and maybe drawn a little on some of my own life to do this, which is that somebody working in the high pressure cooker stress of New York City media can't have a normal life. And that's kind of what Claire. Now, having said all that, if she had a normal life, it wouldn't be very interesting for the book. So it makes it,
That's
I think it makes, nobody really wants to. I mean, when you're writing fiction, I mean, it goes back to like the days of everything from like Cheers with Sam and Diane. Like, once Sam and Diane get together and live happily ever after, there's no interest in the show anymore. It's the tension, it's the struggle, and so that's what Claire deals with a lot. So she's happy, but she's not totally happy.
I know sometimes when I'm reading Claire, I'll be like, oh no, don't do that. Don't do that.
I love when people do that. I love when people respond that way because I had somebody who actually liked Claire, who wrote a review, and he said, there are moments, he said, well, I just want to put my hands around her neck and choke her and tell her to shut, and I was like, I take that as a compliment. I think when I write Claire, and for people who haven't read her, I mean, she has a lot of smart remarks and wisecracks and
It's a lot of fun.
you know, she's not always businesslike. And I think it's like the comparison that I think and I don't know if I thought about this when I'm writing it, but in retrospect, when I think about it, it's not quite the same, but it's kind of like Larry David on Curb Your Enthusiasm. He just says all these things to people that we wish we could say, but we don't. And the other one is Spencer by Robert B. Parker, who there were like 40 Spencers. And I had the opportunity to interview Ace Atkins, who wrote the Spencers after Robert Parker died. And he said that Robert Parker had once said that the charm of Spencer was he says the things to people that we all would wish we say, but when we leave, we say, oh, I should have said that. That's what I should have told him. Spencer says that at the time. So that's kind of what I try and do with Claire. Believe me, I am not nearly as courageous as Claire in my real life. So
During the series, she's grown and changed as a person as well as a professional. Can you give us a little bit of the insight of how she's changed through book one to book six?
well, I want to say I disagree with you on that, Gina, because one of the things that when I started out doing it was I didn't particularly want her to change. Uh,
Mhm.
it's interesting in series characters, some authors have their character change through the series or age and all this stuff, and some don't. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
the same person all the way through. Um, and I would have said at some point, and I have said, like, oh, she's really the same person as in the first book. She hasn't really learned any lessons. There's no, it's just she really is Claire. But having said that, I was thinking about, because you had told me we were talking about this earlier, and I was thinking about it, and I do think in this book she has changed on a couple levels, and the two biggest ones is growing older. So a big theme in this thing is she's approaching her 50th birthday. Now, to
Mhm.
some of us, including me, like being 50 is not the end of the world, but I do remember when I was approaching that age, and it's like a life changer. But it's even worse in TV when you're in the media, where there's this emphasis on the young,
Yeah.
attract women as well as men. So so I have her like coming to grips with a lot of that in this book, that she's not this 35-year-old woman anymore. She's not this hotshot kid. She's this woman who's growing older in an industry where age is not considered a good thing. Um, and the other thing that she grows on, and this has gone through with the books, is her being a mother. So it's a long, complicated thing, but she discovers she reunites with her daughter a few years ago, who's now an adult, and her daughter has a child. So she's not only a mother, but she's a grandmother. And but she's not a traditional mother, and she's certainly not a traditional grandmother. And and she has to struggle with this too. And in this book, the daughter begins having personal problems in her own life. And for the first time, Claire is forced to like be a mother to this woman and actually help her with things.
Yeah.
So, but in general, I try not to make her change too much, and I try not to make her age. If the series goes on for a long period of time, I don't know. I've talked to a number of authors about this, like Sarah Paretsky, for instance,
Mhm.
with Warshawski, Vera Warshawski. She like ages her one year for every 7 or 10 years. You don't really want to age these people, because having Claire as an old, it doesn't work as well for the book, and it is a suspension of belief. I mean, this is a fictional world, and in my
Right.
world, Claire doesn't age too much, and she doesn't change too much, because I like her the way she is, and if she changed, I might not like her as much.
Well, and some of it might just be that we're getting to know her better. And as we read more about her, we delve more into who she really is and just,
She's such fun to write. Because we've talked that I've written a lot of books with other characters. This is actually my 21st published book. I've written a lot more, but this is my 21st published book over the years. And I always like doing all the books I do, but Claire is just such a fun character to write. Like it's just, and the best things with Claire aren't even so much for me the mystery scenes or the scenes where she solves the crime, but it can just be like her trying to deal with a romance, or what to order for lunch, or like how to deal with an annoying super in her building or something. Just the little things, and having Claire be Claire, it's such fun to write. It's kind of a release.
I could imagine it's even more fun when you're pitting her against the dislikable characters in your novels.
Well, you have to, because um you have to pick your targets, because so Claire, I mean, if Claire were to make some smart ass remark to some very sympathetic, some mother of three who's trying to raise her kids, and Claire was like a wise cracking. I mean, nobody wants to see that. Nobody, I don't want to do that. Uh, uh, Claire's targets have to be dislikable. Now, sometimes they're just the obvious choices, like I started off, not this book, but the last book, where she gets into it with like a haughty maitre d' at a restaurant who's like arrogant. And we've all faced people like that. And so, Claire is just letting them have it with all these smart remarks. And we can all relate to that, because this guy's, so you have to make this guy to be a jerk. And now in the new books, I starting with the last book and in this book, I have Claire have a new boss. And I describe this boss as the boss from hell, because she's so unpleasant and terrible on every level. She's a bad person. She's a bad boss. She's totally, cutthroat, bottom line, hates Claire. So she's a perfect target for Claire. And I enjoy doing that.
Mhm.
Originally, I had a boss who was kind of more of like an elderly mentor. And then when you're in a series for a long time, you kind of want to you kind of want to shake stuff up. So I said, well, what if she has a boss that's really terrible? And this boss is a woman, which makes it a little harder for her to, to deal with. And so they go back and forth an awful lot.
Now, are there any aspects of Claire that you don't particularly like? Because I know generally you really like her as a person and you like her snarkiness and,
Well,
you know, but
think about this. If I didn't like him, I wouldn't put him in her.
you know,
I created Claire, create somebody, listen, everything you read in Claire is me writing it. So there are times when I will write something and I will say to myself, yeah, maybe I shouldn't do that, but not a lot, every once in a while. I mean, there are two areas. Number one, because I'm a man writing a woman, there are certain areas once in a while where, and I have a woman agent and I have a woman, and I've had a woman editor in my publisher. And
yeah,
sometimes they'll say something like, well, I don't know if a woman would react that way to this. And I always listen to that,
right.
but, and every once in a while, you want Claire to walk that line where everybody reads her and he's like, oh, I like her. She's spunky. I want to be like her. And the line of, well, she's being an asshole. She's being, she's just being a jerk here, So that's a line you kind of got to be careful of. I honestly haven't worried about that a lot,
Mhm.
and I find with Claire, there are times when I feel, well, maybe I'm going too far with her, either in terms of her language or what she says or the story or what she does or her actions. And I'll sort of weigh and I'll say, well, I could make it a little bit more believable. I can make it a little bit more down the line. I don't have to go quite as far. And I always find that if I go that extra mile and take the chance, it works out better. So I try not to play it safe with Claire, and thus
Yeah.
far, because people seem to like her. And one other thing I want to just say about this, Gina, is because this is something I've thought about a lot. To me, the most important part of my book or anybody's book is that character. I mean, if you get the character right, this it's like I like my stories, but the story. I mean, there are a lot of great characters, and the stories aren't that great, and you still read them anyway.
Mhm.
I mean, I talked about like I read every Spencer book. I love Spencer. The stories weren't that great. I mean, there was no real great mysteries thing, but you followed Spencer. Even if you go back to the classic of all mystery writers, the inspiration, Philip Marlowe, Raymond Chandler. You go back and read those stories now. The stories are really kind of not terribly well put together, but it doesn't matter because you like, and all the great ones, Kinsey Malone and it's like it's the character. So the character is so important to me, and
Mhm.
and this doesn't just, I this character, I wrote this book, the original book in the series. I wrote it like I think three different times with three. Well, I wrote more than that, but I wrote it with three different characters. I had one character, then I changed it to another character, then I had the different. And at some point, I hit upon the Claire character, and then I turned around and wrote another version of that, and I was like, okay, that's the character I like. But it's not, it's not like the character is just there. That character has to grow and develop in the author's mind, and it's just kind of strange how that happens. But like I said, Claire Claire took a while to form, but once she was there, I liked her.
Well, that's amazing. Yeah. So, all right, let's talk about broadcast blues
Mm.
and how that morphed into a Claire story. Because if I remember correctly, it wasn't originally a Claire story, was it?
No, did I tell you? I must have told you that when we talked. I didn't realize I told you that. No, that's absolutely right. I had so the main character beside Claire in this book, the murder victim, who's murdered on like basically the first page, is a woman named Wendy Kyle, who's a private investigator, but like a real like controversial, sleazy private investigator who
Mhm.
basically chases after men cheating on their husbands. So a wife hires you to catch my husband cheating on him so I can get a divorce settlement or whatever. And I had read a piece in the New York Post about a woman who did this. And I was just fascinated by it. And I found out there was a number of women that did this, and even to the point of doing this thing in the book I called the honey trap, which is where the woman will come on to the man in a bar and see if he and flirt with him to see if he picks her up. This is the way to find out if your husband is cheating. And this is a real industry. It's kind of like watching, cheaters on TV and these shows. And I just found it fascinating. And I thought, that's like a great idea for a book. So I started writing a book about with that character, Wendy Kyle, as the main protagonist, and getting involved in a story where she's trying to find a cheating husband, but of course she finds out all sorts of other stuff that leads into a story. And I wrote about 50 pages of that, but then at some point, um, I had to write another Claire book, and I just thought, what if I just switched it and just took this character that I'm writing on and made her the victim in this book, and then Claire had. And one of the things about this book that comes through a lot is Claire really relates to the Wendy Kyle character, who's very controversial, has gotten herself a lot of trouble, the victim. And at one point, Claire says to her friend, I really like Wendy Kyle. And the friend says, what are you talking about? She's dead. You never met her. She's, yeah, but I just think I really would have liked her if I ever knew her, because she's sort of like a Claire character. And so Claire becomes more interested in trying to find out what really happened to her. But that was the story. And the other big aspect of broadcast news is wealthy, rich people who do bad things, which is always kind of fun to write about. And that just comes from reading the news, like reading all this, and not that these people do bad things, but reading all the stories about Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos and all the super rich people. And I just thought, well, so what if there's a super rich person and he's cheating on his wife, and Wendy Kyle has to start looking into this? But of course, that's not really the real story of what he's doing. He's also involved in much more horrendous things that she uncovers. And
Mhm.
that basically is the story in Broadcast Blues. It starts off as a story about, spying on a sexual relationship, and turns into much, much more involving political corruption and murder and all sorts of other stuff.
I can't wait to read it. I haven't gotten my chance to read that yet. But I have a question. So, since you had already started the story and you had a really good basis of Wendy, I mean, you had really like written her as a person as opposed to as offshoot character. So, was it easier to make her a relatable character for Claire because you had so much
Yeah,
information about her?
I think so. But this isn't an unusual thing for me. I'm one of these people. I like to write, so I have written for most of my life. And a lot of the stuff I write doesn't get published for a variety of reasons, but I'm always writing something. And so a lot of my books are like this, that I'll have written something that didn't get published, and then I'll need something and I'll say, oh, I'll take a chunk of that and make that part of the book. And yeah, it always makes it easier because I don't have to create the character. I've already created the character. And I sort of like the character, but like I say, it's my books. Yeah, I don't sit down and create everything from scratch. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in my life that I draw on, and I have no hesitation about plagiarizing myself, which is to basically go back and find things that I have done in the past that, and then use those. I one of the problems with that is, of course, and I'm still old school. I mean, even though you do anything on a computer, I have everything printed out, and I have pages and pages of books that I've written, and I'm always terrified to throw any of them out because, like, one day I might want to go back and look at that. So they're all stacked up. Of course, when I want to find something, I can never figure out how to find it. But anyway, those are a little of the secrets of the professional writer, right there.
So, with you being old school, you were a journalist for a lot of years. Now, how is that the same and different as what you write about Claire? Because she's a TV journalist and you were a newspaper journalist.
I was, but I did work for NBC News for the last 6 years of my career. I worked in digital, but even though I wasn't on air and stuff, I was working in the NBC studios, both with the local stations and then with NBC News, the network. But the Claire stuff isn't so much about a TV newsroom; it's about a newsroom. It's like what a newsroom is like, because a newsroom in newspapers is very similar in some ways. to at least to a TV newsroom, at least the ones that I've worked in New York City with the high pressure and the stress, and we got to break the big story and all that. And yeah, I just draw. I'm just trying to think how to answer the question, but it's just I just draw on a lot of that. Now, in terms of the difference between working at a newspaper and then writing fiction, uh, completely different, completely 100% different. And
Mhm.
I've written so many books when I was working full time, and people would say, "How could you do that? How can you work all day in a news office and then go home and write, or get up in the morning and write?" Because it's completely different. When you're in a news organization, your job is facts. That's what you do. You have to find the facts. You have to check the facts. You have to work on the facts,
Yeah.
and that's the job. It's more important than the writing. When I'm writing a novel, I just make it up. I don't have to worry about facts. I mean, I basically have to, it's fun. It's like a release. It's completely different. And they're both fun. And people say, which do you prefer? And I'd like to think that I've had the two best careers that I could ever imagine, which is I've been a journalist for most of my life, but I've also been a writer. Again, my first book was published years and years ago, and I've had 21. It's not like a lot of people think they'll say like, oh, you left, because I left NBC in 2014. And
Mhm.
a lot of people say, oh, so you stopped working full time and now you're writing. And I've published like 7 or 8 books since then. Oh, you started writing books. Like, no, I was writing books while I was there too. But it's been, both of them are great. And I would highly recommend either to anybody, although being a newspaper person these days is pretty tough because there aren't too many newspapers anymore.
That's the truth. Can you tell us a little bit about the books that you wrote before Claire?
Sure.
Because
But
I don't know.
I don't think we have time because there are quite a few of them. Um,
Yes.
yeah. So before Claire, I did a series about you're going to see a consistency here that they're pretty much all newspaper media stories or TV, and they're pretty much mostly women. But I did write a series with a man who was a New York Daily News reporter, where I also worked. And I did that from like 2014, I guess, to like 2018 when the Claire series started. And his name was Gil Malloy. And
Mhm.
I have four books on that. He's a lot like Claire, I think, just, kind of like a hopefully likable, but, smart mouth guy. That's all I know how to write because, I like, and before that, so there was a long gap, like where I was devoted to my media career and I really wasn't writing. But in the late 90s, I wrote 2 big thrillers. One was called Loverboy, uh,
Mhm.
and another was called Playing Dead. And those were like serial killer standalone books. And then I also wrote a series with a character called Jenny McKay, who amazingly enough was another TV newswoman. And so I've done a lot of books over the years. But I'm one of these people, like I don't know how to, and I don't particularly want to write about areas that I don't know. Like I don't particularly want to write a book about a lawyer or some accountant who discovers, fraud in books or something, because I don't know anything about that. Um, I write about people in the media because I know that. I
Okay.
write about New York City because I know that. And all my books kind of center around that. And I think that helps because my strength in the books is whether or not you like the book, you can't look at it and say, well, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, because obviously I'm writing about my own experiences. Although I did have one review once where somebody said, oh, Belsky obviously doesn't know how a newsroom works. I was like, okay, come on, wait, and again, the newsrooms in my books, when people say to me, oh, it's so great, you give a realistic view of a newsroom, but it really isn't. I mean, it's a fictional, view of a newsroom. I mean, it's like anything. If a newsroom can be boring like anything. You sit around, you drink coffee, you try and figure out what you're going to do next. You have boring meetings. That's not Claire. Claire's always got some big story or murder or something going on.
Yeah.
It's fictional, but I mean, it's the same way that Columbo is fictional, or anything is fictional. And the thing when talking about it being fictional, the example I always like to use is that in all my life, in all my career in journalism, like years and years of journalism, I never knew one reporter, not once, who solved a murder on his own. Yeah, and didn't work with the way, but who solved a murder on his own. I've never heard of that ever happening. Well, Claire solves a murder every book, I mean, but so it's not realistic, but it's fiction, so
It's not supposed to be exactly.
I the story I always love is the Raymond Chandler story, where somebody once said, well, Philip Marlowe isn't a realistic detective because, real detectives don't get hit on the head every time they walk in a room or have beautiful blonde clients. And he said, no, you're right. He's totally unrealistic. But if I made him like what a real detective did, nobody would read me. And that's kind of the way I feel too when I'm writing Claire. She's a news director, so her job would be like budget meetings. I don't think people are going to want to read about her doing a budget meeting.
Well, I definitely want to read about Broadcast Blues and find out more about Wendy.
Yeah, Wendy's an interesting character, and I will say that I'm playing around with the idea of doing a well, she's a really interesting character, and I'd love to figure out more to do with her, but yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. But you have other things coming up soon, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I also, beside writing under my name of RG Belsky, I write under the pen name of Dana Perry. And these are a series of books that's published by a company called Bookature, which is actually based in London, but has, huge distribution here. They're mostly online and Audible, as opposed to being, in bookstores print. Although there is print on demand, but they sell a lot of books online. And so I have a new series coming out from them in April. And this one features a different character, a woman, but she's actually in law enforcement. She's an FBI agent who chases after serial killers. And her name is Nikki Cassidy. And I have written not one, not two, but three Nikki Cassidy books. They're all done. They're all lined up and ready to go. And here's the scary part, at least for me. They're all going to be released simultaneously in April by the publisher. So in other words, rather than buying one book and then waiting a year for the next book and then waiting another year, the original plan was, well, we're going to do them one a month. And they said, well, that's not a good idea. And I thought that was crazy. And then they said, well, no, we're not going to do that. I go, oh, thank God. And they go, we're going to do them simultaneously. And I go, okay. But the idea is, and I'm sure you and a lot of the people watching will understand, it's like binge watching on TV, like Netflix or something now. People want, you see it and you don't want to wait a year or even a month or whatever. And suddenly it switches. And how many times if you're watching, Reacher or Bosch or something on on Amazon or Netflix, and you say, I'm going to watch one, and then suddenly it goes right into the next one. Oh, I'll stay with this one for a while, and that's the idea. And it'll be interesting to see how that works. But I had to write 3 books, and they're all going to come out in one shot in April. So the first one is called The Nowhere Girls, and it's by Dana Perry, and look for that. And obviously, I'm going to be talking to you about that because I'm going to be working with partners in crime on that series too.
That's exciting. But I have to say, I probably will be binge reading in April. I'm not going to be able to put these down.
I basically had to write 1,000 pages, so you damn well better read them.
Won't be a problem, I promise. All right. Can you tell readers how they can find you, both as RG Belsky and Dana Perry, so that we can grab these books?
Right. And by the way, just so curious, so I basically am Dick Belsky, which has always been my name in journalism. So if you look me up on Google or something, Dick Belsky, you'll see all my journalistic stuff. But once I started for reasons that are too complicated to get into, I became RG Belsky. None of this is necessarily my own. It's like publishers figure this stuff out. It's the same with the Dana Perry. People are like, oh, some pretentious. I'm like, no, I didn't do that. They, publishers have reasons. But I'm RG Belsky and or Dana Perry, but mostly as RG Belsky. And there's a website, very easy, www.rgbelsky.com, and everything about me is on there. You can also sign up for my newsletter there, which comes out pretty regularly and tells you what I'm doing and where I'm at. And then I'm on Facebook author under RG Belsky. I'm on Twitter as @Dick Bell, and you can find me, all over the place like that. But you know, like I said, right now, Broadcast Blues is out in hardcover and obviously an ebook. I was fortunate enough to have it be an editor's pick on Amazon, which is great. I don't know
Exciting.
what happens, but I was very, yeah, wow, that's great. And obviously, so far, everybody seems to like it because when you write a book, you sort of cringing, like, oh my God, you know, like what if people don't like this? So the reviews have been really good, which is, and it's always a lot of pressure on an author. And there'll be an Audible version that's going to come out, and the Audible's kind of cool. It's kind of like I've never had a movie made of my books, but it's kind of like having somebody else read your words. It's kind of cool to hear. And there's an Audible version that'll be out either at the end of this month or early in February.
It's so exciting. And just as a heads up, if people have not read yesterday's news yet, I saw yesterday it was still on sale for Kindle.
Yes.
So you can get started.
So yesterday's news, yeah, that's a good point. Thank you for bringing it up.
Mhm.
Yesterday's news was the first in the series, and last month they were giving it the digital copies away for Kindle free, for, to try and encourage people to get into the series. That's like amazing. I had like 200 new reviews on Amazon. I mean, just
Wow.
people just like suddenly like, oh, it's free. So the hope is, of course, that people read that and then they say, oh, I want to read the rest of these. And even though the free offer ended January 1, it's only $1.99 now. So come on, people, even if it isn't free, $1.99. I mean, you can come up with that. It's less than a cup of coffee. So anyway, it's $1.99 all month on Amazon. And it's a good intro into the series, because I mean, you don't have to read the books in order. They can work as standalones, but whenever you read a series, it's kind of fun to start with the first book. Did I lose you? I think I lost you. Are you there? Gina? Gina? Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm so sorry. We're having a windstorm here and it's a
Yeah,
little crazy.
yeah. It was weird because you were on the screen, but you froze, and I had this feeling that it was like you weren't nodding, or you were just sort of frozen. And where did we lose it at? Do you remember?
You were sharing about the freebie.
Yeah, and
And
anyway, so yesterday's news is now for the rest of this month. It's $1.99, which is almost free. Hopefully, if you wanted to try out Claire, that's a great way to do it. All the Claire books kind of work as standalones. So you don't have to read them in order, but there is stuff obviously in later books related to the earlier books, and it's always good to. I always find it interesting to read a series when you go back and read the first book.
Mhm.
And this is a really easy way to do it and get you into Claire for $1.99. So it's the Kindle version is $1.99.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming with us today and hanging out.
I
And
loved it. Yeah.
we will talk soon. And again, when we get to meet with Dana Perry.
That's right. That's right. 3 times.
It's
I'm
very exciting.
I'm exhausted just thinking about it, but hopefully everybody will enjoy the books. Thank you, Gina.
Thank you so